Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call the 12th meeting of the Community and Protective Services Committee to order. This is a virtual meeting during the COVID-19 emergency. City Hall is open to the public, but with reduced capacity and physical distancing requirements. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube as well as the city's website. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or phone 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cpsc@london.ca. Colleagues, to begin, we will look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent items. I have not been made aware of any items that colleagues wish to have pulled, but I'll look for that now. Councillor Van Holst.
Mr. Chair, I wanted to ask some questions about 2.7. I was looking for some more details on modular housing.
So would you like that pulled, or are you just looking to ask some questions of staff?
I would just ask the questions. I don't know how we're proceeding these days based on comments of the mayor on consent agendas.
Well, I will just share with you, Councillor, that until the clerks direct me otherwise, I'm proceeding with the way that the committee has been operating, which is questions and comments on consent are welcome. We've only been asking for people to pull if they wish to vote on it separately.
Thank you. I don't need to pull that.
Okay. Just looking one more time to see if anyone wants anything pulled. I'm not seeing any indications of that, so we will open the floor for questions and comments on the consent agenda. And I've got Councillor Van Holst and then Councillor Squire.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And through you to our staff regarding item 2.7, we're moving ahead with modular housing. And I wonder if we could get just a better idea of what a modular house looks like. How big is it, or is it the materials being used that makes it modular? I'm seeking more details.
Okay, we'll look to Mr. Dickens and see if we can get some information for you on that.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you to the councillor for the question. We actually do plan as civic administration to be reporting back to this committee in December with an update on modular housing, at which time we would be happy to go further in depth into the modular styles and what modular housing may look like. Certainly the report that you see before you helps us continue to advance the modular housing strategy that this committee endorsed back in July of this year, and allows us to continue our prep work to be able to come back before the appropriate committees with our modular housing plans at a later date. Just to answer the question outright, modular is a form of construction. It's a type of built form. Modular is typically produced indoors in a manufacturing setting, which allows us to ideally reduce some of our lead time and process time by anywhere between 20 to 40%, so that we can move through the necessary steps we need to take in the planning process while the units are being constructed elsewhere offsite.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dickens, and I'll just acknowledge Mayor Holder, I've got you on the speakers list now as well. Councillor Squire.
I just want to speak to item 2.1 just from 2 points of view. The first is, this is something that I've heard about from people when I've been out in the community and talking to them about housing. So it's going to be interesting to see how this works out in terms of promoting housing. The whole concept of the city having the head lease and then leasing out units to other persons in need, in terms of what does it cost us in terms of management, you know, how onerous it is for the city to do this. So I just wonder, just as a question to, first of all, a question to staff, are we going to get reporting back on this to see how well it's functioning, whether it's something we should be doing, or is it something we should be getting out of after this test on this project?
Thank you, Councillor Squire. Mr. Dickens, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you through the chair. Yes, I will comment on that, and then I'll actually pass it over to my colleague, Mr. Cooper, who's leading the head lease program to respond further. In short, yes, this is a program where we will continue to report back to council. Ideally, it is a successful program, and we are coming back to council with regular updates and hopefully subsequent agreements that we can execute. Should the program not pan out the way that we expected, this is tied to our Housing Stability Action Plan, and we will report back accordingly. You may see this report back be included in such reports as our housing quarterly reports as well. But I will turn it over to Mr. Cooper if he has any other further comments.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens, and through the chair. Not a lot more to add. Mr. Dickens handled that, hit the nail on the head there. I will note that we are one of the only communities in the province of Ontario, if not the only community, to do this. I know head leases are widely used in other sectors, but from the city perspective, we are one of the only municipalities to do this. And so there are a lot of eyes watching us on this, and there might be some trips and falls, but I think we're committed, and our agencies that will be supporting individuals are committed to look at new and innovative ways to support people in their housing journey, from homelessness to housing stability.
Thank you for that, Mr. Cooper. Councillor Squire has a follow-up.
So first of all, to comment on that part of it, I think one of the things that's been floated around and I've heard a lot about is using motels, purchasing motels and renting out rooms to people. I have to say I find this a much more interesting option. We're not buying property. We're not taking that responsibility. We're becoming the landlord, so to speak, under that. So I find this much more promising than the idea of actually purchasing motels and renting out rooms. So I would just say that. The second thing I want to say about this is it's really important to remember where this money came from. And it was originally money that was going to go to the London Police Service in our assessment growth. And they were kind enough, I believe, to agree that this was an appropriate use of that money. So I think it's important for two aspects. First of all, when you're dealing with housing and issues like that, a little bit of money can often go a long way. And so just that small amount of money is enabling us to go into an area, as has been indicated, that no one else in the province has been involved in, and that may be a very promising solution to homelessness. I also can't help but point out when I hear colleagues say, well, when we add on to the budget, well, it's only $100,000 or it's only $200,000. It's really important that when we're doing budgeting, we realize that $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 is a lot of money, and it can go a long way to helping people in the community. So I'm really enthused about this. I'm enthused about where the money came from, and I'm glad that it's being presented as an option.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. Mayor Holder, I'll go to you in just a moment. I just want to let Councillor Kayabaga know I have her on the speakers list following yourself. Mayor Holder.
I should go to staff for their continuing work in this area as it relates to housing. And I'd like to make a point that has been said in previous meetings, but it bears repeating, and particularly relates specifically, Chair, to modular housing. In no way is this considered substandard housing. This is considered very economical to build, very practical and easy to locate. It will have full amenity capabilities. And the other thing I'd like to do is acknowledge both the federal and provincial governments who, in this past week, have provided London with close to $14 million. And we recognize where the money comes from, but it's huge. And it's been as a result of our staff and some political negotiations and dialogues. But shout outs to staff again for keeping vigilant on this issue and ensuring that the purpose was always extremely clear what this was intended to do. And I would agree with Councillor Squire with regard to some of the funding on some of the head lease issues that as it relates to another area that seems to all circle back to housing, but it really is a testament to the flexibility, support, and I think the honorable approach that our police have taken with respect to getting us to this place as well. So thanks to them. That would be it, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to speak at your committee. I just wanted to, first of all, make a comment to thank staff for this report. I think that we've been waiting for different ways and different innovative ways to provide housing to the city, and I think this is one of them. I did have a similar question to the one that Councillor Squire had asked about the motels. So basically what this is doing is actually steering away from the motels, and we're not going to be renting out any motels to use as an alternative. Is that correct?
Mr. Dickens?
Thank you through the chair. So the hotel usage is part of our COVID response. The hotels are going to be in place on a temporary basis through to the end of March 2021. We see this as a complement to that intervention, but I just want to stress that the use of hotels and motels has been in response to Ontario health regulations being placed upon emergency shelters, which required significant changes to accommodate physical distancing requirements. So the use of hotels is temporary at this point through to the end of March, and it is a part of our COVID response. The head lease program certainly allows us to provide an opportunity for people to transition away from those temporary short-term housing options, such as a hotel, into something that's more sustainable and long-term.
Thank you. Just another follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me to follow up. Just to kind of get an idea of what we're talking about, how many units are we talking about with $300,000? And another question I wanted to ask as well, in terms of the COVID responses that we have done, I know that we'd use the Western Fair as a COVID hospital, and when that's done, we're going to have to take all that down, but it is a space that has beds, that has everything that needs to be to house someone, and we already spent money on that. I'm just wondering if this is not a location that can also be used within the next couple of months as we go into winter to be able to shelter people who are currently unhoused.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Kayabaga. Mr. Dickens or Mr. Cooper, did you want to respond?
Certainly through the chair. Thank you for the follow-up. At this point, the head lease pilot program was approved for 10 units. So we're looking to maximize that pilot and achieve our 10 units that we had targeted. The question around the field hospital is a very good one. Unfortunately, it's not one that I have an answer for. I think there is an agreement in place between LHSC and Western Fair, in which the City of London has played a facilitating role in those conversations. Certainly, our team, and Mr. Cooper's team in particular, have been spending a great deal of time and resources exploring all options that are available to us for the winter months to protect our vulnerable that are currently sleeping unsheltered or in encampments. So I don't have an answer for you on the field hospital. That's sort of outside of my jurisdiction at this point, but happy to take that away and find some answers for you.
So not a question, Mr. Chair, just want to make a final comment. I do really want to thank staff for bringing this report and the work that's put into this. I do, however, want to say that 10 units is not enough, given the numbers of people that we have who are still needing to be housed and all the things that we need to be doing around homelessness, especially in the core area. This is great. It's a great report, but I think that we also need to start coming up with ideas of how to respond quickly, because the winter is upon us now. So, and this is a conversation we were having last year and the year before, and we really have to find a solution or not continue to have the same conversation. But thank you for the report and the work that you've put into this. And thanks for letting me.
Thank you, Councillor Kayabaga. Councillor Pelosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for recognizing me at your committee. My question through you to staff is in regards to item 2.3, being the update on free menstrual products available at city facilities. Recognizing this is one that came through while I was still on this committee. Glad to see this report coming back and that it came in under budget. And then in 2019, I see we have 40 locations offering free menstrual products, with 33 more locations to be rolled out next year. with an ongoing annual cost of $8,500. Glad to see that these products are available in the female, male, and universal washrooms. Looking through you for staff, recognizing it started some community conversations about menstruation and equity and access to products. Looking to see if there's any staff or public feedback of how users are actually finding the system that staff could share with us.
Thank you, Councillor Pelosa. Ms. Smith, are you able to provide us some insight on that?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I had an opportunity to talk to a number of my staff at facilities about this, and maybe it's a good thing that there's not been a lot of feedback, and that at first there was some concerns about if the products would be used appropriately. I think the important story is that they're there for emergencies, and when people need them, they use them, and when they don't need them overall, they leave them in the dispensers or the trays. So I don't have a lot of anecdotal feedback, but I think the good news stories here is if people need them, it's eliminating a barrier for them to be able to access programming, and they're free.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Councillor Pelosa, anything further?
No, thank you. Just I do recognize that it was a concern beginning of people using dispensers, opening it up, finding out that it wasn't what some children might have thought it was, or just things being wasted. So it's great that that feedback's not coming either. So thank you for the opportunities. I have no follow-up.
Okay, I have no one else on the speakers list for the consent agenda, colleagues. I'm going to ask a quick question myself from the chair, if you'll indulge me. Mr. Dickens or Mr. Cooper, the Head Lease program got some attention in local media in the last few days. And I know there was some initial disappointment with the level of uptake. Has the attention that's been drawn to it led to any additional opportunities, at least potentially being on your list to follow up with now, or are we still struggling to find participants?
Thank you through the chair. I will start this answer and then I will hand it over to Mr. Cooper. He has some of the numbers and the details. I would say our intent of this report was to identify, we went through a procurement process which didn't generate any responses. Our team did do an active reach out to several organizations, groups, associations that do represent a significant number of landlords in our community. Perhaps it didn't register for some, or it didn't register high on a priority list, or maybe it was missed. I think through the attention this report has received in the public, we have had an upswing in responses. To put it mildly, we've had several phone calls and emails and an active outreach from several small, medium, and even large landlords in our community. So that's very positive. It was never our intent to shame any landlords or the community into not responding to our procurement process. But we are pleasantly surprised and very pleased with the response we've received since the report has been covered publicly. I will ask Mr. Cooper to perhaps provide some more specifics as it relates to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens. And through the chair, yes, I will echo your comment about our phone has been ringing off the hook, so to speak, since that news article has been published. We have received a number of calls and emails from individuals, both smaller individual landowners, all the way up to the large developers here in the city. Obviously, knowing we have pre-approval for about 10 units as a pilot, we are managing the conversations a bit differently to try and make sure that the units that are available are matched well to the individuals that we know that will probably be utilizing these spaces. But it allows us also to then look beyond the pilot potentially and have some opportunities of what might be available beyond the pilot. And a number of medium and larger developers have come to the table offering some units and some conversations about units in the long term. It's also allowed us to have the conversations around just housing affordability with larger landlords and how what programs we have around our rent supplements or housing allowances that might be helpful outside of a head lease to support individuals around maintaining that affordability on vacancy, things like that.
Well, thank you both for that answer. I think it's great news when something that starts out maybe a little bit negative turns into a positive as a result of the attention. So I'm glad to hear that it's created an upswing on that. I don't have anything further other than I wanted to echo Councillor Pelosa's thanks and congratulations to Ms. Smith and her team around the menstrual products in city facilities. You know, pre-COVID, I certainly spent quite an amount of time in arenas. I know these are appreciated by the families that use those facilities in particular. I'm sure they're appreciated elsewhere too, and it's always nice when staff report back that they've come in under budget, so well done on that. With nothing further, I'll look for a mover and a seconder for the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Councillor Squire, and we'll call the vote.
Chair, in the absence of my system up, I will vote yes.
Thank you, Mayor Holder. We'll record that. Councillor Salee, we're looking for your
I'll
vote.
vote yes. Just I saw the Zoom link, but I didn't see the other link for the eScribe.
Okay, do you need staff to send that to you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Okay, we'll get that sent to you right away.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, colleagues. We will move on now to item 4, item for direction. And the first one is 4.1, which is an invitation to Dr. Mackey to discuss COVID-19 health measures. This was put forward on the agenda by Councillor Van Holst. So, Councillor Van Holst, would you like to introduce this?
Yes, I would. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I hope that we can have Dr. Mackey come and visit us and maybe answer some questions at our next meeting, which would be the beginning of December, because that would provide some nice clarification for ourselves and people moving into the holiday season.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, I'll look for any questions or comments that you might want to share on this. Councillor Squire, and then I've got Mayor Holder next.
I'm not going to be here on this committee on December 2nd, so I suppose it's not going to affect me as much, although I'm philosophically opposed to lengthening meetings. But I just want to make this point for people to think about. The separation between the role of the medical officer of health and city council is an important one. The medical officer of health has recently made orders with regards to certain decisions. He's also, and I think this is excellent, he's taken great steps to explain those orders publicly through open houses, and I sent a note to him saying how much I appreciated that he would make orders, he would consider changing them, he would communicate to the public. What happens when Dr. Mackey comes to council, as he did last time, in my view, is it blurs that line between the role of council and the medical officer of health. And what we have, and what certainly happened to me both before and after that meeting, people were asking me to seek explanations from Dr. Mackey and seek from Dr. Mackey reasons he was doing things and tell Dr. Mackey why he should and shouldn't do things. And I made it really clear that that wasn't my role as a counselor. I made it clear to people who would listen, and also at the meeting, you know, when these issues came up about masks. So I think we should be really cautious about this. I think at first blush, it sounds like a good idea. And I'm sort of grateful that I won't be at that meeting if this is passed to engage in that. But I just think councilors should be very cognizant of the separation of the roles between the medical officer of health and council. And the last thing is Dr. Mackey's always available, at least in my experience, to the public and to us to explain what he's doing, why he's doing it. And recently he's done a fantastic job of doing that. And he has even had to take the heat, as a politician would take, on some of his decisions. So I think he should be left to doing that, and we should be engaging in the things we're doing with regard to COVID. So I'm very hesitant to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. Mayor Holder?
Thanks very much. I'm in concurrence with Councillor Squire for the same reasons. Now, I have a bit of a different perch as well, in that twice a week I participate in a press conference with the medical officer of health. But I can tell you, when there were issues with respect to various concerns that the community had with regard to his Section 22 order. I can tell you that anything that was received through the mayor's office, he was exceptionally obliging and said, make a point of ensuring that those are sent to me because I intend to do some town halls. And I think he's been extremely thoughtful with the things that he's been doing. Look, to have the medical officer meet this committee, I mean, first, I don't appropriate. I'm not. If anything, it would be SPPC. It's worth hearing. Not going to get a price for this purpose. It would
Sorry, Your Worship, I just want to let you know that you're breaking up. We actually are not able to hear your comments clearly.
Well, that's too bad because I was as articulate as I've ever been, Chair. Can you hear for a moment?
I'm sure you were waxing eloquently. Unfortunately, we lost most of it, but you do seem to be clear again now.
Okay, I'll be very brief. I will not support this. I think if anything, it would go to SPPC so that all council members would hear it. But but even then, look. Firstly, I have a privileged position in that I have 2 press conferences a week with the medical officer of health. Separately, Chair, I can tell you that he is exceptionally open, as Councillor Squires indicated, to people reaching out to him directly. If any councillor has any specific questions or the community does, he's exceptionally open with that and with town halls as well. So am I mindful of that? Look, it'll be the pleasure of the committee, but I don't think there's any information necessarily that we would get that we wouldn't otherwise get through either direct access and or communications that he puts out on a very consistent daily basis. So my thoughts.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have anybody else on the speakers list. I will just take a moment to very quickly myself say I agree with what Mayor Holder just said in terms of we've been dealing with our COVID responses as SPPC so that all members of council are involved in the COVID responses. I'm also mindful of the fact that at a future SPPC, thanks to an amendment from Councillor Salee and Councillor Morgan, I believe we'll be receiving an update from our staff on the mask bylaw. I think if we wanted to have an update from the Middlesex Health Unit from their perspective, and I'm cognizant as well that Dr. Mackey does not have unlimited hours in the day, so whether it was him or someone else, I think that would still most appropriately land at SPPC, and I think that it would be I don't think it would be appropriate actually for us to refer this to SPPC, Councillor. I think that it would actually should be directed to SPPC if you want to pursue it that way, so that the appropriate committee is dealing with the appropriate request. So those are my comments, and I will say that I also have had nothing but willing responses from Dr. Mackey when I've had questions. And I have had some, and I've gotten responses from him, which I really appreciate him making himself available for. So I know you have this motion on the floor, Councillor. Do you have a seconder for it?
I don't know that I actually put a motion on the floor. I think at this point, Mr. Chair, I just move receipt of the communication and leave it at that.
Okay, so we've got a motion to receive the communication from Councillor Van Holst. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Squire, thank you. Seeing no further speakers, we'll call the question.
Chair, I'll vote yes and ask that that link be sent to me as well, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll record your vote as a yes, and the clerks will send you the link for eScribe as well. Councillor Van Holst, we're waiting on your vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Clerk. Moving forward to item 4.2 on the agenda. Colleagues, you can see this one's a little bit complicated because we've got some communications. We've got requests for delegation status. We've got a motion from council members. We've got 2 separate motions from council members, actually. as Councillor Van Hulst did circulate a proposed amendment. So just to deal with this in an effective way, first I'm going to look for a motion to receive the communications that were on the agenda. It's moved by Councillor Hillier, seconded by Mayor Holder, and we'll call the question on that.
Chair, I vote yes.
Mayor, yeah. Mayor Holder, I'm not sure if you've been able to log into eScribe yet. Did you want to vote orally on this one?
I thought I had, Chair, and I vote yes, and I'm working on eScribe.
Thank you. We'll record that as a yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, colleagues, the next item to deal with on this item for direction would be requests for delegation status, and we did have a couple of those. The clerk did, sorry, we have just one at the moment. The clerk did advise all those who had written in requesting delegation status that because a bylaw process would require a PPM anyway, that they would likely be referred to a future PPM if appropriate. Obviously, colleagues can take this any way they want, but I'm going to suggest that maybe we could have a motion to refer requests for delegation to a future PPM. And looking, I see Councillor Hillier is willing to move that. Councillor Squire seconds. And seeing no hands up, we will call the question on that.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Okay, so that deals with the communications and the request for delegation status. Now we have the main item that is on the agenda, the proposed amendment. I know that I circulated a proposed motion myself with support from Councillor Hopkins, Pelosa, and Kayabega, who are all with us at the meeting today as guests to the committee. So I'm going to put that motion on the floor. I will ask Councillor Squire to take over as chair so I can do that. Councillor Squire, if you'd like to take the chair.
Sure. I will take the chair, and I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chair, to speak on the to speak to the motion, present it, and speak to it.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. So the motion has been circulated to members of council, but I do want to just take a moment to read this out so that people are very clear what the motion is. And the motion reads that civic administration be directed to investigate options to address community concerns around graphic unsolicited flyer deliveries to residential properties, including but not limited to steps taken by other municipalities and potential amendments to the existing municipal nuisance bylaw or an introduction of a new bylaw, and report back with options for council's consideration. So that's the motion that's been tabled, and I'm sure that a number of folks will be interested in speaking to it, but I just want to lead off with some comments. And colleagues, I really want to emphasize to everyone that we focus on the substance of the motion today. And that substance is a staff report back on options that we could consider in responding to concerns that our constituents have raised loud and clear with us about flyers with graphic materials being delivered to the mailboxes of their homes and apartments. There are people on both sides of the issue who want to make this an issue about abortion. And I will say this very cautiously but candidly. I will always stand with women to defend their rights to reproductive freedom and choice. But I have to emphasize, this is not the issue that is before us today. if the complaints we were receiving were, for example, a result of Mad Canada distributing flyers that showed human bodies that had been mangled in car accidents, constituents would be raising the same concerns, and we would have the same problem to deal with or to consider. Of course, Mad Canada has been able to engage the public in a respectful dialogue on a very important issue as well without using those kind of tactics. So that hasn't happened. But if that had happened, I suspect we would be in the same place today. And again, we are asking staff to look at what other municipalities have done. And I emphasize have done because other municipalities have taken some actions. We hear people saying that this is a freedom of speech issue, and respectfully, again, it's not. Freedom of speech or expression, like all the rights laid out in the Charter, are subject to such limits as are reasonable in a democratic society. And I want to really focus on where this applies elsewhere. We have music albums, yes, they still exist, that carry parental advisory labels for explicit lyrics. We have television shows that are prefaced by mature subject matter, viewer discretion is advised. We put PG and PG-13 and adult accompaniment and R ratings on movies. Canada Post has requirements around explicit material being delivered by their letter carriers in an opaque envelope with adult material or similar wording on the outside. So it's well established that not all content is appropriate for all demographics, and it's reasonable to impose some requirements around questionable materials. I think it's also very clear that it is within our jurisdiction to consider limits on activities that may impact a resident's ability to enjoy their home or community. We do it all the time. We do it on sign bylaws. We do it on noise bylaws. We've done it around reduced speed limit zones. So I want to be really crystal clear. This issue is impacting people's ability to enjoy their homes, and we've heard it from communications from people. You've seen some of the emails about the trauma that women who have suffered a miscarriage or other things have experienced as a result of these flyers coming into their hands. So I also just want to address one other item as we consider this. One of the things that was on our agenda was a communication about a petition calling us not to do anything and saying, you know, 7,700 plus people have signed this petition calling us to take no action. But on the group's Facebook page, they're bragging about how there are signatures from 89 countries, how 1,900 plus of those signatures are from Ontario. And if you look at the emails you've received, as I've received, the postal codes on the senders, we have signatories in Ontario from Niagara and Ottawa and Norfolk County and Smith Falls and Sudbury and Hamilton and Toronto. Very few of these are from London. Well, colleagues, we're elected to represent Londoners and make decisions for London, not for people from 89 other countries in the world. So again, I want to come back to the heart of this, that staff bring back options we wish to pursue, if we wish to pursue. There are a broad scope of powers under the Municipal Act that we could exercise on the basis of harm reduction and public safety. Likewise, our powers are fairly broad to define what qualifies under a nuisance bylaw. The previous council, to its credit, exercised those powers when it dealt with the so-called street preachers issue that had many Londoners upset. And I think if we ask ourselves honestly, is this issue radically different from that issue? To me, the answer is a no. So I'm really encouraging you to support this. I ask you to let staff go, gather the information, bring it back to us, and then we can decide on a course for London, whatever that course might be. And I'm not predetermining the outcome here. I want staff to go out and tell us what the options are, and then we can have a discussion about this. So I hope you will support this motion today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Your comments are going to lead me to have to comment. I didn't think I'd have to, but I'm going to have to turn over the chair at one point because of some of the things that you said. Is there a seconder for this motion from the committee? There's the mayor seconding. I've got Mayor Holder seconding. So the motion is moved and seconded. comments or questions from council members, please? First, I'll go to the committee itself, Councillor Hopkins. Is there anyone on the committee wishes to make any comments? All right, go ahead, Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you. And as you can see with this motion, my name appears on the motion. And I want to thank Councillor Lewis for the work that he's done on the motion. And I want to just start off with speaking about the petitions that are out there in the community. And there are many petitions regarding these graphic images. I want to just speak to the petition that appears on the agenda and speak to the concerns that I've heard going back a couple months ago on unwanted flyers. So we've heard all these concerns, and it's really important to understand that a lot of the emails we've been receiving relate to other petitions that are out there. This motion just came before us last week. So I just want to remind the committee to understand where this information that we're receiving and what petitions they're pertaining to as well, because there are, again, other petitions. And for me, it is very confusing as to what's going on. But I also understand that there's a growing concern in our city, as well as in other municipalities, of not wanting flyers, and in particular, certain flyers. There's not much we can do. We're not authorized to change the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's federal jurisdiction. We're not authorized as a municipality to tell Canada Post who and where they can deliver mail to. This motion has absolutely nothing to do with signs or posters that are out in our community. I know there's not going to be one group out there or even an individual that's probably going to be happy with this motion. But to me, it's a start. After thoughtful dialogue and compromise with Councillor Lewis, we came up with a motion here that I'm hoping this committee can support. It took a bit of time and work. This to me is an opportunity for residents to request, not to receive, unwanted flyers. It's also focusing on waste reduction. It's a stab on how we can address the concerns of unwanted flyers in our community. So I am hoping that this committee will support this motion. I know there's another motion out there, and I'll wait for the committee to discuss that, but I hope that Councillor Van Hulst's motion will be referred to staff, because the whole idea of this motion is for staff to come back to us with a report on opportunities to look at our nuisance bylaw to make those changes. It's all that this motion is. And again, I'm hoping this committee will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Pelosa? Well, let me go to Councillor Van Hulst since he's on the committee. Sorry, Councillor Pelosa, I'll just have you wait a second. Councillor Van Hulst, if we're dealing with your motion, I can deal with it separately. If that was what you were going to ask me, sorry. If you want to deal with it separately, I didn't see it as an amendment to the motion. I saw it as a separate matter that we could deal with in that separately. Is that okay with you?
Mr. Presiding Officer, I'm happy to let Councillor Pelosa speak first. I was going to bring forth the motion that I presented to Council in the added agenda. Subsequently, I've sent to our committee another possible amendment that kind of combined the two. However, I think those who would like to speak to this particular motion, let's deal with that first.
Okay, well, I think you almost answered my question. So would you like your motion to be brought as an amendment to this current motion? Or do you want it to be brought as a standalone motion after we deal with this motion? That's in your
Okay.
hands.
All right. Well, at that point, let me speak to the motion and the communication that I had.
Okay,
and
so
I'll-
you're asking for, so let's deal with Councillor Van Holst's motion, which is going to be an amendment.
Actually, it's a separate motion.
Okay,
but,
so you want to deal with it as a separate motion? I think that's the best way to deal with it, Councillor. Yes, no?
Okay, well.
Or I'll just rule, look, I'll rule. I'll say, let's deal with that as a separate motion after this motion, without prejudice to your motion at all. I think it stands on its own. And so we can deal with the first motion, and then we'll deal with your motion after that. Is that okay?
Okay, I'll accept that ruling.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to add something then to the motion that's on the floor? Speak to that?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So I would, and I sent a communication. What I'd like is for the motion to be broken up a little bit, so I can vote for some of the things and not for the other things. I think it's important that we be specific when we make the motion, and in it we say we send staff to look at a couple things and then just come with any new bylaws that they want. And I prefer we not do that. I think that first we should see what other communities are doing, maybe even look at their own reports on this, look at our own bylaws, and not have them give them carte blanche, because that's going to be more time. And you'll see in my own motion, I suggest that there's a more timely response that could be the case.
So just so I'm
I did
clear.
send something to the clerk, and it just separated some pieces out. And,
Okay, that's fine. I think that's fair. We can break out those elements. I know it says, including but not limited to, so I assume you want to take out steps taken by other municipalities, and then a B part will be potential amendments to the existing nuisance bylaw, or C, an introduction of a new bylaw. So you want an A, B, and a C?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's fair, and I understand that there are those issues in there, and I think we can accommodate that. Am I right, clerk? That shouldn't be difficult. Is there anything else you want to say? If we're going to break it out, but is there anything else you want to say on this motion?
I can wait for some other comments.
Okay,
So
I'll go to Councillor Pelosa then.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer, for recognizing me at committee today. And to my colleagues, thank you for the conversation at hand about the graphic content of leaflets and what currently is allowed to occur. I'm asking your support for the motion before you, for staff to bring a report back to council so that we know what and any options regarding graphic leaflets distributed by individuals to residential mailboxes and what we can do. As elected officials, residents are writing to us, calling for action, sharing very personal stories about what graphic images have on them when they're unsolicited, unexpected, and they're just there right on your doorstep. In return, I'm asking what we can do to address these issues and these concerns. To be clear, this motion is to look into graphic content of leaflets on any topic. This is about the issue. It's not about the message, and it's not about taking sides on an issue that we have no jurisdiction over. It's simply about the graphic images on unsolicited flyer deliveries to residential properties, and what, if any, measures a municipality can enact. And that's why I'm interested in the staff report of knowing what colleagues in other municipalities have done and what we could do in response to residents calling us on us for information. Thank you.
Any other committee members want to speak to this motion? All right, I wish to speak to it. I can turn the chair back. How about I turn the chair over to Councillor Hillier and I'll speak.
I have the chair, and I recognize Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a couple of comments. I wasn't going to, but I am going to. A couple of things. I really appreciate the councillor's approach, two of the councillors' approach, not to express opinions on the substantive matters. I do have to say, Mr. Chair, that you, although you said you weren't going to, you did state what your position was on the issue, and I would caution that that's not appropriate, that we're dealing with the particular issue, and I would have appreciated if you didn't do that. No one will know through this whole debate what my position is on the substantive issue. We have to be impartial and objective in what we're doing. And that is going to involve a careful consideration of the law and what the law says we can and cannot do in this area. And with all due respect to the chair, this has everything to do with freedom of speech. One of the hallmarks of freedom of speech is that you have to be most vigilant about freedom of speech when the speaker is someone you absolutely abhor or don't agree with. They have every right to deliver their message, no matter what it might be. And that's an accepted principle, frankly, that courts have said for an extended period of time. So this has got a lot to do with freedom of speech and limiting that right. We know that. We dealt with this in the street preachers issue. That's quite true. In that particular issue, a compromise that was developed was that we would not in any way impair the street preachers from saying what they wanted to say, no matter how objectionable, on street corners, in parks, so that people could hear them. What we did prohibit was them using it to target a particular person. So I want to be very careful because there seems to be some impression out there that we somehow impeded people's ability to speak. So I want to be really clear about that. I will be supporting the motion, but I'm going to expect that we're going to very, very carefully consider what we can and cannot do. And a lot has been said about what the community is saying to us about certain things. This may not be popular, what I'm going to say, but when it comes to freedom of speech, something may be said in the community that's objectionable to the vast majority of people in our community. That's the way freedom of speech works. If someone was to stand up on a street corner in a Nazi uniform and start saying terrible things, there may not be much we can do about it except one thing. And this is the most important thing, is to get the truth out there. And I just want to talk about some of my constituents have done that. They've gone out to places where people are on street corners providing false information, and they've counter-protested. And I give them absolute credit for that because that's what happens in a democratic society. So I just want us to be very cautious. I understand quite clearly as a lawyer that there are limitations on freedom of speech. There are already recognized limitations that have been made criminal offenses in the criminal code. You will see that those are rather limited. So this is about freedom of speech. It is about our community. I'm open to what will be provided to us, and I'll support this motion today. But I always will stand on the side of freedom of speech as much as I can.
Thank you, Councillor Squire. The chair recognizes Councillor Hopkins. I see your hand up.
Sorry, Mr. Presiding Chair, I forgot to take it down.
No problem. Then I recognize Councillor Squire. Or sorry, Councillor Van Holst, waving his hand.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the words of my colleague, Councillor Squire. And I just wanted to point out and maybe take that a little further, is that any bias on our part seems to be the most likely thing to lead to a court challenge and a subsequent loss in this area. And I presume it is important that we not abandon methodical governance in this. And I just wanted, through you, Mr. Chair, to ask our legal counsel to provide correction if I'm wrong.
If staff could comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I understand the question. Yes, I mean, anything that's said at committees will be, could become part of a, court record in terms of deliberations made by committee and council with respect to this matter. And so, yes, it would be prudent to be mindful of, any position that you might be taking with respect to limiting charter rights and particularly freedom of expression under the charter. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I turn the chair back over to you, Councillor Squire.
Thank you very much. Is there any further comments on the motion that is on the floor right now? And we are going to break it out into different sections. Go ahead, Councillor Van Holst. You want to speak?
That's it. And then perhaps we can have the clerks read that split out motion once it arrives, because then I'll comment on where I might be voting against it.
You want to speak? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you'll have a chance to wrap up. Do we have the motion broken down into the constituent elements that we can get up for councillors to see? So the Councillor Van Holst's comments, I suppose, make sense in context. Post it on, can you post it on our under current item, is it? I don't see it broken down. Okay. Where would I see that? Where do I see that, Sean? Oh. I think I see it. I hope you all see it under current item, and you'll see it's broken down now into 3 separate parts. And I think now, Councillor Van Holst, you wanted to address it in the context of those different parts. And to be fair, others may want to do that too, now that it's been broken down and subject to your comments. And I do have the chair back on the list. So go ahead, Councillor Van Holst.
Okay, thank you very much. And I see that I might ask for one more change, but I'm happy with the A and B. And however, I don't know why we would suggest our bylaw department look at new bylaws before we find out what other municipalities have already done. So again, I hope we can be methodical about it. I also prefer that we didn't use the phrase including but not limited to, because that really sort of voids the purpose of breaking it out, because the not limited to could just put it back in there, if you see what I mean. So my concern is that I think in other cases, the council has been found to have shown a bias because they were considering the views of only one side and simply approaching it more from an advocacy situation, and they lost in court. And I think we should be concerned that there may be a challenge, and how we deal with this matter right now could have an effect on that. So that's why I would be voting against that part. I think I'm happy to see what other municipalities are doing. I'm happy to see how we might tweak our own nuisance bylaw. But as far as bringing new motions in, I think that's not a step we should take right now. So I would vote against C, but I'd also ask that the including the but not limited be removed or made a part of the C.
Yeah, my only concern there is, and the wording is, I suppose, to allow staff, if they came up with something else that was a possibility, that they would be able to bring it forward. Please keep in mind, Councillor, that whatever comes forward, you can vote against again. So I mean, you can make a motion to amend this to eliminate the but not limited to, and see if you can get the support of the committee, but I'm not gonna just change it on your request. That's how you would have to do it.
Okay,
So
well,
that's your pleasure.
Yeah. So no, I think you make a good point, and that's good. So I'll accept that the way it is. I would also point out that, again, I have another motion coming up, and part of that is to deal with things in a timely manner, and having staff create new bylaws that we just may or may not like takes more time. So maybe even through you, I could go to staff and say, how long will it take for a report such as this?
So the report back on this, yes. Staff, somebody can
Yes,
help us with that in terms of timing?
Through the chair, given our existing workload and the deferred items to this committee, we would report back in Q3 2021.
All right, so I understand. Is that, and I know your enforcement is legal. I mean, I thought I would hear from a lawyer, I guess. Is legal in concurrence with that they would be able to provide the information they need to provide? I know there's a lawyer on the line. Ms. Marshall, could I get you to comment on that?
Yes, I believe if it was 2021 Q3, that would be fine.
So there's your answer,
Okay.
Counselor. Go ahead.
Yes, and if I could add one just more, one follow-up.
By the way, Counselor Hopkins, I see you, you don't have to keep, I'll get to you.
Okay. And so I guess my question to staff is, would the report come back sooner if we didn't include Part C?
All right, someone want to answer that part of it?
Yes, through the chair, Part C has no impact on when we would report back.
And does legal concur with that?
I would only indicate that it's not clear at this point whether civic administration would recommend a bylaw, introducing a bylaw. And so I wonder if you might consider having a report before you determine whether to recommend introducing a bylaw.
And that's why we have lawyers. Ms. Marshall is for that answer. I think that's an interesting point. But there's a motion on the floor. There's not much I can do. I know, Councillor Van Holst, perhaps when you bring your motion, you can find out how quickly a report on your matter can come back, because I don't think there'd be a hard and fast rule that they have to come together because they're separate now. Does that help you?
Thank you.
All right, I'll take that as you're content with where we are right now.
I'm content. I'm still, because of that, I'm going to vote against C. And then because I don't think the creation of bylaws by our staff is
yeah, you've made that point. You've made that point a few times.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Hopkins, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Presiding Chair. If you could read out what A, B, and C is, and then I'd like to make a comment, please. I can't see what A, B, and C is.
Sorry about
The motion is that the civic administration be directed to investigate options to address community concerns around graphic unsolicited flyer deliveries to residential properties and report back to a future meeting of the Community and Protective Services Committee outlining information and options, including but not limited to A, steps taken by other municipalities with respect to this matter, B, potential amendments to the existing municipal nuisance bylaw, and C, introduction of a new bylaw with respect to this matter.
Thank you for that. And since I was involved in the motion here, I would like to make a comment, if I may, to the committee. And I would not recommend you remove it, having C separate as introducing a new bylaw. That does not make any sense in the intent of this motion. That portion came with a bylaw or an introduction or an amendment. It's one together. There's no sense having a new bylaw when we really have not had a debate, received a report back. And I think it really just changes the whole motion. I would recommend just, if you prefer to leave it that way, but having a new bylaw was not the intent of this motion.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Chair. You go ahead. You seem eager to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hopkins, because that was exactly what I wanted to get to. In the original motion, before Councillor Van Holst asked it to be separated out, it said amendments to the existing municipal bylaw or an introduction of a new bylaw. It did not, with all due respect, Councillor Van Holst, direct staff to come back with a draft bylaw. It said, come back with potential amendments or, and by separating it out this way, it is not respecting the intent of the motion. So I agree with Councillor Hopkins. I do not think that B and C should be separated out. I think it needs to be together with the original language.
All right, so let's go back to where we were then, and I want to make sure I'm respecting the original motion and the movers. If we change the and after B to or, I take it you want steps taken by other municipalities to be reviewed and potential amendments to the existing municipal nuisance bylaw or introduction of a new bylaw. Would that satisfy my colleagues who drafted this? You're making me exert a lot of legal muscle, brain muscle here. So I think that's a completely valid point. Councillor Van Holst, you could still vote against C, I suppose, but then the committee could overrule you. So is that fine if we make that change? Is anybody gonna? No, let's make that change of the and after B to change it to an or. What? No. Okay, well, we'll do a motion to amend it then. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, I don't know what you're... Look, I'm gonna, just give me a second to see if I can put this, see, I always get the chair on these things that are so simple. It's such a blessing. I tired Councillor Hopkins out. She looks like she's had enough of me. Oh, she's laughing. Thank you. Good.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm still not able to find the motion on.
Okay, well, we need you to do that then. We need that to happen, and maybe the clerk or someone can help. The only thing I would say is I found it, so that that really means it must be possible. Okay, can we clarify what's going on or where we are in terms of what my request was to change that and to an or? Are we going to be able to do that? We can do that now. So we're going to change the and after B to an or, so that that's clear. And then Councillor Van Holst, you can still speak against, you can still vote against C if you wish.
If I could find it, I would appreciate some instructions on how
B and
to
C are
locate.
separated now.
They're not, because they're not two separate votes. An or, one or the other.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm going to have to make a ruling on that, of what can be done and what can't be done, with all due respect. The challenge is going to be, Councillor Van Holst, now is that there's an or there is separating out number C. Because of what you've brought forward, you may have to vote against the entire motion.
That's that's unfortunate. What and I'm afraid I don't actually understand the movers' comments. So apparently there's some nuance that I missed or
Yeah, I'll
interpreted
explain it to you. I'm
some
happy to.
differently.
So their concern was this. Their original motion was not directive of staff to do all three of those things. And if I'm saying something wrong, they'll let me know. In other words, they wanted steps A and B to be done and then possibly go on to number C, which was introduction of a new bylaw. But their motion was not to say that would be done and brought back to us. It may be that it's not by staff if they have another option. Now, because of that, I think it's fair of them to say to me, as chair, this whole thing sits together as one. And although we've split it, I think it fits together as one. So you're going to be put in the position of voting for it or against it. I'm sorry.
Well, that's so it seems to me, and still, I would really appreciate, Mr. Chair, if the clerks could tell me how to find the motion.
Yeah, well, we'll do that for you. That should be done.
But,
And I agree with you 100%, but we're first going to change it to or. And then Councillor Hillier, I saw you waving your hand. I will get to you. So,
okay.
Councillor Van Holst, I'm going to move on.
Thank you.
And then if you have something else you want to say, we can go to you. Councillor Hillier?
I'm just looking at the wording of B, and it was at the end, instead of and or, and if required, C, an introduction of a new bylaw with respect to this matter.
You know, we're just adding stuff and taking stuff out. I think or does the job. I got to say, or does the job. If the movers of the motion are happy, then I'm happy. Because it's their motion, certainly not. And then we can vote as we wish.
And or means we will be making a bylaw though, and if required.
It doesn't say, it should not say and or. It should just say or. It just, when it's changed, it'll just say or. Okay, I'm going to go, you're going to wrap up, Chair. So does anybody wish to speak before we vote on the motion? I'm going to call the motion in its entirety. And Councillor Van Holst, you want to speak again? Go ahead.
Well, I would say, and I almost insist, it's my prerogative to have a motion broke out. I need you to explain why why B can't be two things. So, and maybe it's this point. They want an amendment to the existing bylaw or introduction of a new bylaw. Now, when they say, my esteemed colleagues, a new bylaw, do you mean to revoke the previous bylaw in its entirety and then add something new to replace it? Or is this new bylaw something in addition to the one we have presently? Because
I think no.
That's my interpretation.
I think, just as chair, let me answer what we have here. So I don't think it's saying that at all. I think it's saying they're going to look at the steps taken by other municipalities. That's going to happen. A potential amendment to the existing municipal bylaw, or introduction of a new bylaw. So that's all it says, Councillor. And I'm going to remind you, Councillor, you may not agree with all of it. These things are going to come back for a vote. These are just directing staff, and we're getting tied up here on what we're sort of asking staff to do. And also remember, it says in the wording, but not limited to. Staff might come back with something different. And I think what we're arguing about is what we're asking staff to do.
Yes.
And I think we're becoming overly technical in terms of what we're asking staff to do. So that's why I think once that word is changed to or, I think it sits in its entirety and it'll something will come back. So that's where we are. I'm going to go to the chair to wind up, summarize.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I'm going to be really brief. This comes back down to the substance of the motion before you, which is to ask staff to report back to us in the future. And there's 2 steps to this. One is to look at what other municipalities have done. And I don't know if Councillor Van Holst or other members of council or this committee have looked at what other municipalities have done, but there are variations. There have been amendments to existing bylaws. There have been new bylaws introduced. Hence Part B, potential amendments or introduction of something new, because different communities have handled this differently. And so we're asking our staff to come back and share with us what options have been available elsewhere. And then we as a council can have a discussion on what we feel is appropriate for London. And that may be a variety of things. It may be one thing. It may be the status quo. But that's what we're asking our staff to do today, is directing them to go out and investigate and come back on an issue that a lot of Londoners, and I've had more messages coming in during the debate tonight, have raised with us. And we have a duty to listen to their concerns and to see what might be possible for them. That's all we're looking for here. So I hope colleagues will support this. Let our staff go out and do their work, and we will hear back from them in 2021 when they're able to report back, and we can go from there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So now that we've heard from everyone, we're going to call the vote. Mr. Mayor, are you present? Oh, are you going to vote?
Yeah, well, actually, I thought I had e-scribe up. I vote yes without e-scribe.
Nice to see you again, Mr. Mayor.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you very much. Next time you want me to deal with a matter, Mr. Chair, I will be running out of the chamber. You're giving me things, but it's good exercise for my brain. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, and I consider it good practice for you for your upcoming role as Chair of Planning. Colleagues, we'll move on to item 4.3. This is proposed amendment to the noise sound bylaw.
Yeah, sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councillor Van Holst.
As I still have a motion regarding this that the chair ruled we would add to next.
You are correct, Councillor Van Holst, and apologies for that. I'm going to turn the chair back over to Councillor Squire to let you deal with that.
Sorry about that. That's my fault, Councillor Van Holst. I was so eager to be out of this from my point of view that I did that. So you have a matter on the floor. I take it, is your motion to have that referred to staff also for as part of this report back or for a separate report back? Maybe I can find out.
Yes, you can find out. And my motion is just to be put on the floor. I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Hillier who was willing to second that in order to have it on the floor. And I would like to simply move this motion and tell you why. And then it's up to staff, it's up to committee to decide whether they want it referred to the previous motion. My hope is that this one is more straightforward, or at least my colleagues don't have the confusion with my report that I seem to have with theirs.
Thank you very much. Would you like to start then with your, you can set out why you're bringing the motion and then you'll have a chance to wrap up at the end.
Okay, thank you. So as I looked at the situation, we had a dilemma it was that we had a group or a number of residents complaining about the graphic materials. So that was something we needed to deal with, while at the same time we have those emails coming in saying, don't do something about this because it's a freedom of speech issue. And so I actually contacted both groups and tried to broker a solution where perhaps we could put a little sticker on the flyers that said warning graphic content and prevented them from being opened accidentally. However, that wasn't seen as a long-term solution. However, this one does seem to be something that we could do immediately, and it has to do with the Trespass to Property Act. So anyone can write a company like CCBR and revoke their assumed permission to enter your property and place a flyer. And if you write them and revoke that permission, then they're legally obligated to honor that, or they can be charged with trespassing. And so what I propose is that we let our citizens know that their existing rights are able to deal with this situation on an individual basis quite effectively, and that we let that be known. So my motion was of two parts. One, that we create a webpage, london.ca/no flyers, and put a description of how this process to revoke permission to trespass can be done. It's and then B is that we promote that on our website and on the digital billboards that we have as well. So that's something that we can always do as a council to take some quick action. And these things I don't believe require a report from staff, although you could ask for one, but they're I think quite well laid out. This is a strategy that was on the website for the pro-choice group that's written us, and I think it's nice because it's an action that doesn't interfere with freedom of speech. The action can be taken immediately and have an immediate effect. So that's what I would like to put on the floor, or that's, I guess, what's on the floor now. And I look to my colleagues' comments.
Could I just, to clarify, because motions are action matters, staff will probably be saying, what are you asking us to do? So is the motion to take the two actions that you have under immediate actions, create a web page, london.ca/no flyers, and to advertise that web page on our site and digital billboards? Is that really what you're asking for? The rest is a description, but is that what your motion is?
That's my motion.
All right.
That's A and B.
Okay, and I understand, Councillor Hillier, you'll second that?
Seconding it, but I'd like to have seconded to refer it back to staff to take into consideration for the previous motion.
With the previous motion? All
Yes.
right. Is that okay, Councillor Van Holst, or do you want it to be a standalone motion that it'll happen right? In other words, your motion would instruct staff to do that right away without delay.
Right. That was my intent of coming up with a motion, to have something that's not going to take a long time, and something that wouldn't.
Okay, so I don't want to interrupt you except to say this. If Councillor Hillier won't second it as is, you need to find another seconder to second it to be instituted right away.
Yeah, so what I believe that Councillor Hillier can simply second the motion and then immediately make a motion to refer, which takes precedence. And then I'm happy to.
Well, that's up to Councillor Hillier. Councillor Hillier, if you're going to second the motion, and he's really quite right. You shouldn't add a proviso on it. You're either going to second it or you're not going to second it.
I'm sorry, you are correct. I second the motion, and I would like to refer it back.
All right, so now we have a referral. I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be too lawyerly there. I was just trying to clarify. The mayor does the lawyerly thing at this committee. So there's now a motion to refer Councillor Van Holst's request I take it to staff to be considered along with the previous motion. Is that your motion? All right, do I have a seconder for the, seconder is Councillor, sorry, Chair. I'm demoting you right now, Chair, Councillor Lewis. All right, so that's moved and seconded. So is there anyone who would like to speak to the referral before I call that for a vote? Okay, first I'll let you I'll let you go last. Chair, go ahead.
Very briefly, Mr. Presiding Officer, I'm happy to support this. I think it could be one of the components of a strategy moving forward. I also think to Councillor Van Holst's concern about immediate action, there's nothing preventing individual members of council. In fact, I know that Councillor Pelosa and myself have both shared the information about the Trespass Act on our social media. I suspect that other councillors probably have too, although I apologize if other co-signers on my motion have done so and I didn't notice on their Facebook accounts. But I think that we can do this on our own and still give staff an opportunity to bring this back as a potential action item through their report. So thank you, Councillor Hillier, for referring this so that staff can look at it in the whole as opposed to just on its own.
Thank you. Any others, just to the referral at this point in time? Councillor Van Holst, do you want to speak to the referral? I think, and just keep in mind, you've already explained why you want it right away rather than with the other motion. So go ahead.
Okay, well, I guess I don't need to repeat that, but I'll thank our chair for seconding that referral and my colleagues for confidence in this. And yes, of course, people can share this separately. I think the one interesting point we had there, and I would remind people, is that we have this ability to make use of the digital billboards to share a message more broadly. And that's something that we can take advantage of at any time. So at that point, I guess I'm happy to support the referral as well. Thank you.
All right. So if there's nothing further, which I'm just sort of got my fingers crossed on, we'll call the vote on the referral of Councillor Van Holst, ma'am.
Chair, I'll vote yes.
Okay.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
I'm for real turning the chair back this time.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And colleagues, we'll move on to item 4.3, the proposed amendment to the noise sound bylaw. There's a request for delegation status from a Mr. Mailer. That request is for the next meeting of the committee in December, not for today. So that's been moved by Councillor Squire and seconded by Mayor Holder. Any discussion on the delegation status for December? Seeing none, we will call the question. And the clerk will have that up in just a moment.
Chair, let me get ahead of the clerk and I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Bear with me for just one moment here, colleagues. Okay, so we have one item left under items for direction. That's 4.4. Colleagues, this was an added report from staff. This is with regard to the Rapid Housing Initiative. So we'll get that. I'll look for somebody to move that so that it's on the floor. Councillor Hillier and Councillor Van Holst, and we'll open for discussion. Seeing none, we will call the question. I just want to say thank you first to staff for turning this around very quickly and getting it to us so that we can move forward on this. Councillor Van Holst. Mayor Holder.
Yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, Clerk. And that just takes us to item 5, the deferred matters list. And colleagues, I will just draw to your attention that we will be able to strike an item off the deferred matters list today, as we have received the staff update on the menstrual products in city facilities. So we'll look for a mover for the deferred items list. Councillor Hillier, seconded by Mayor Holder. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
Chair, I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 6-0.
That concludes our agenda, colleagues. So we'll just look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Squire has both arms up and seconded by Councillor Hillier. We'll just do a hand vote on that. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.